We carry on our journey around the vineyards of Occitanie, and we are still in the Languedoc, and this time we're not talking about an appellation, but we're talking about an IGP, an Indication Géographique Protégée, called Pays-d'Oc. This is the largest wine region in France, stretching from the Rhône Delta all the way to the border with Spain and to the west, close to Carcassonne. An area, if you were to drive from the Rhône to the Spanish border, would be about 250 kilometers. Within this area, you have every soil type within the Languedoc region, plus all the different microclimates. But this is a region that is based mostly on grape variety, or I should say labeling is mostly based on grape variety. And in Pays-d'Oc, we have up to 58 authorized grape varieties which are allowed. Some international varieties, which you'll be familiar with, and local ones too, but also quite a number from further afield, and a few surprises. For red wine, Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon and Syrah are the big categories and the biggest sellers. And for white wine, you have Chardonnay and Sauvignon Blanc. But you could also find grape varieties such as Carmenère, Mondeuse, Nielucia, which is Sangiovese, and Tempranillo for red wines. And for white wines, you can find everything from Albarino, Gewürztraminer, Terret, and even Riesling. So what this means for the winemakers is that you have a huge panoply, a huge choice of grape varieties to choose from. Just because it's IGP doesn't mean that there's no link to a sense of place. Many IGP wines actually come from grapes grown in AOC areas. So there may be a number of reasons why people choose to label their wine IGP Pays-d'Oc. For example, the wine could be a single grape variety, whereas the AOC only permits a blend. You may have some grapes that come from areas which are outside the delimited AOC areas. Or you might have a wine that's based on a grape variety that is not authorized for an AOC wine. For example, Chardonnay for white, or maybe Cabernet Sauvignon for red. Other reasons may be that the yield, the maximum permitted yield is higher if you want to make an entry point higher volume wine, or perhaps you want to blend across region, or maybe just purely for commercial reasons. IGP, which was formerly known as Vin de Pays-d'Oc, is an important category not just in its domestic market in France, but also in international markets. This is a category that's had a huge success in the last 20 or 30 years in many markets. I mean, the figures are staggering. 800 million bottles of wine are produced under the IGP Pays-d'Oc designation. About half are sold in France and half are exported to 170 different countries. I mean, it's hard to imagine the 170 different countries, but that's how many countries you can find IGP Pays-d'Oc. In terms of the split of the wine, it's actually a more even split than you find for the AOC wines. So red is about just under 50%, rosé is quite a large proportion, around 30%, and white accounts for around about 25% of the total production. When it first came about in the 1980s, Pays-d'Oc was really about entry point wines labeled by grape variety. So inexpensive wines based on predominantly Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon, Chardonnay, and Sauvignon Blanc. Now the category has evolved. Now you find more medium and higher priced wines, blends, often labeled by a cuvée name rather than by grape variety. So the category covers all bases now. It's become more serious while still retaining that early ethos. So overall, if you want to sum up the Pays-d'Oc in a single word, I would say freedom. It gives the winemaker or the producer the ability to grow whatever they want, to produce it in a fashion whatever they want, and to label it in a more flexible way. Many people describe Pays-d'Oc as French wine with a New World twist. I prefer to use a music analogy. I see Pays-d'Oc more as classical, jazz, blues, and rock all rolled into one. Pays-d'Oc, there's a genre and style out there for everyone. We come to the tasting, and the wine I've chosen is a white wine, a wine that really represents for me the ethos of Pays-d'Oc. This is a wine that's called Les Orièges, and it comes from Domaine de Clos-Vallon. This is a biodynamic estate run by a lady called Catherine Roch, who in her former life was an architect. And she created this domain in one of the most northerly parts of the Languedoc, north of Fougères, in the Cévennes mountains, high in altitude, really quite cool climate for the Languedoc. And as a result, she planted a lot of varieties that you wouldn't necessarily expect to see in this part of the world. So in this wine we have Chardonnay, Petit Manseng, and Riesling. Those are the main three varieties. And then to complement that, you have four other varieties. You have Viognier, Clairette, Roussanne, and a variety called Petit Arvin, which comes from the Valais in Switzerland. So we can see just in this selection, we have a lot of very cool climate varieties in this one wine. Let's take a look. So just looking at the color of this wine, it's really quite deep in color. It's quite sort of golden, more intense than many white wines I would expect from the Peytoc designation. It has got some age too. This is a 2015 wine. On the nose, as you'd expect with all these different grape varieties, you've got all sorts of aromas going on here. We've got everything from citrus, we've got some grapefruit, we've got some apricot, we've got a little bit of tropical going on. We've got some lemon peel, almost like those preserved lemons. So really quite complex array of aromas. On the palate, the wine just sort of dances on the tongue. You've got a real high amount of citrus fruit character going on here. Everything from the fresh citrus, the grapefruit I mentioned earlier, to very much of this lemon citrusy peel character, almost like a waxy sense to the wine. Underneath, you've got this incredible acidity, which is underpinning the whole thing. So a combination of the cool climate where we are in Baie d'Arieux, plus also some of these varieties with high natural acidity, Petit Manseng, Riesling, Clairette, so these are all high acid varieties. But the overall combination is something that really works together. This is like an orchestra in a glass. You know, this is not 7 individual soloists doing their own thing. This is 7 grape varieties working together. It's like a combination of Alsace, Burgundy, Jurançon, the Rhône, Languedoc, and even Switzerland, all in a glass. Excellent.